certain jokes or certain attitudes and outlooks are just out of fashion. And in the end, the whole point of a joke is to entertain.
Rowan Atkinson, the man behind the lovable Mr. Bean, just delivered a scathing critique of Keir Starmer's push for stricter hate speech laws, and he didn't hold back. Atkinson called out Starmer's policies for crossing the line from protection to censorship, using real-life examples that sound like something out of a satire sketch. From arrests over harmless jokes to policing everyday opinions, Atkinson argues, Britain is losing its freedom of expression. Is Starmer's vision for a safer society worth the cost of silencing voices?
Must have free expression, and in comedy you must be able to make jokes about absolutely anything. I mean, the only question is you would be wise to choose a context in which it's going to be appreciated, because not all jokes suit all contexts. The joke.
Rowan Atkinson isn't just a comedian with a knack for making people laugh. He's someone deeply committed to defending free speech. Known worldwide for his iconic roles as Mr. Bean and Blackadder, Atkinson has become an unexpected yet powerful voice in the debate over free expression in the UK. Recently, he's voiced his concern over what he sees as an increasingly restrictive legal climate around speech. Unlike his comedic personas, Atkinson's stance on this issue is serious, rooted in a belief that the right to express oneself openly is fundamental, even when that expression is uncomfortable or controversial. Atkinson believes that the laws designed to protect people from genuinely harmful or dangerous speech are now being stretched beyond their original purpose, stifling open dialogue. He argues that in the UK today, the boundaries around acceptable speech are tightening in ways that risk suppressing harmless opinions and even humour. To him, this trend isn't just a slippery slope. It's already creating absurd situations where everyday people find themselves facing legal trouble for minor or harmless comments. In Atkinson's view, the line between protecting the public and policing free expression has become dangerously blurred.
Like the man arrested in Oxford for calling a police horse gay.
A couple of recent cases stand out as examples of this overreach. One involved a man who was detained simply for calling a police horse gay. To Atkinson, this incident was absurd. While the comment may have been frivolous or silly, he argues that it posed no real harm and certainly didn't warrant legal action. The fact that someone could be detained for such a minor remark is, to Atkinson, a sign that the law is being taken too far. He believes that while it's essential to encourage respectful speech, the law shouldn't punish people for harmless comments. If we begin criminalising such trivial expressions, he argues, we're stepping into dangerous territory where almost anything we say could be grounds for legal trouble.
Nah, it's a cult. It's a cult. There's a cult, it's a sector. It's a cult. There you go. Good job. It's a sect.
Another troubling case for Atkinson involved a teenager who publicly called Scientology a cult. This teenager faced legal repercussions simply for expressing an opinion on an organisation. For Atkinson, this wasn't just a random incident, it was part of a broader and worrying trend. He sees this as an example of how society is becoming increasingly intolerant of dissenting views, even if they're blunt or controversial. In Atkinson's mind, the freedom to criticise and question institutions is a cornerstone of any healthy society. The idea that a young person could be penalised for expressing a critical opinion is, to him, a red flag signalling a culture that's moving away from open dialogue. These cases might sound like isolated events, but Atkinson believes they're indicative of a larger shift. Society, he argues, has become overly sensitive to perceived offence, losing sight of the importance of open debate. While many people may brush these incidents off as minor, Atkinson sees them as signs that free expression is under threat. He worries that people are increasingly afraid to speak openly for fear of backlash or even legal consequences. This isn't just about protecting controversial speech, it's about preserving an environment where people feel safe to express ideas, even if those ideas challenge the norm. What makes Atkinson's stance so compelling is that it comes from someone who has spent decades pushing boundaries through comedy. His characters, whether Mr. Bean or Blackadder, often highlight the absurdities in societal norms, using humour to make people think. To him, comedy and satire are essential tools for reflecting on society's limitations and exposing its flaws. And he believes these tools are crucial for democracy. Atkinson isn't just defending free speech for the sake of his art. He's defending it because he believes that the ability to criticise, joke, and even offend is essential for societal growth and progress.
Section 5 of the Public Order Act, that thing where you can arrest anybody for saying anything that might be construed by anyone else as insulting.
Atkinson's advocacy goes beyond words. Years ago, he played a critical role in the campaign to reform Section 5 of the UK's Public Order Act. This section allowed authorities to arrest individuals for making insulting comments, even if no harm was caused. Atkinson argued that this provision gave authorities too much power, enabling them to police trivial expressions and dissent. His campaign was successful, and the law was amended to remove the term insulting, marking an important victory for free expression. To Atkinson, this was proof that defending free speech requires constant vigilance and action, as restrictive laws can easily creep into everyday life. In Atkinson's view, what's at stake is bigger than a few isolated cases. He's concerned that society is inching closer to a place where holding an unpopular opinion or making a harmless joke could land someone in trouble. He's particularly troubled by the way laws intended to prevent hate are increasingly used to silence voices simply because others find them offensive. To him, this is dangerous territory where society risks creating a culture of conformity, shutting down genuine debate. Rowan Atkinson's message is simple yet profound. A truly free society must tolerate a certain level of discomfort in public discourse. Free speech isn't just about protecting polite or agreeable opinions. It's about allowing space for debate, disagreement, and even a bit of provocation. He argues that when speech is limited too tightly, we risk creating a culture that discourages people from questioning the status quo.
Who we think a national treasure. What are you going to do about it? And the police panic and they scrabble around and then grasp the most inappropriate lifeline of all, Section 5 of the Public Order Act, that thing where you can arrest anybody for saying anything that might be construed by anyone else as insulting. You know, they don't seem to need a real victim. They need only to make the judgment that somebody could have been offended if they had heard or read what has been said.
Keir Starmer and Rowan Atkinson might seem like an unlikely pair to find themselves in a public clash, but here they are, standing on opposite sides of a highly sensitive issue: hate speech regulations and free expression. Starmer, as Labour's leader, is pushing for tighter hate speech laws, particularly online, with the aim of protecting vulnerable groups from harassment, abuse, and harmful rhetoric. On the other side, Atkinson, the comedian we all know as Mr. Bean, has become a vocal advocate for free speech, arguing that these regulations risk harming the very foundation of democracy by stifling the right to express unpopular or even offensive views. This isn't just a debate over policy, it's a clash over what kind of society we want to live in, and the stakes are high. Starmer's stance on hate speech stems from his background in law and his dedication to social justice. He's made it clear that he believes stronger regulations are necessary, especially in the digital age where social media has become a hotbed for harmful content. For Starmer, this isn't about limiting freedom, but rather about protecting people, especially those in marginalised communities, from speech that crosses the line into targeted harassment. He and his supporters argue that vulnerable groups are often subjected to intense abuse online, and this abuse has real consequences, affecting mental health, safety, and well-being. Starmer sees tighter controls on hate speech as a necessary measure to foster a safer online environment, where people can engage without fear of relentless attack or cruelty. But while Starmer's intentions might be rooted in protection, Atkinson argues that the execution of such regulations has dangerous implications. From Atkinson's perspective, these laws, even if well-intentioned, risk eroding a fundamental democratic right: the freedom to say things that others might not want to hear. He argues that by setting boundaries on what's considered acceptable speech, society risks creating a culture where challenging ideas, dissenting voices, and even harmless jokes become targets for censorship. For Atkinson, free speech isn't just about allowing polite or agreeable opinions. It's about safeguarding the space for debate, disagreement, and, yes, even offence.
The strongest weapon against hateful speech is not repression, it is more speech. And that's the essence of my thesis: more speech. If we want a robust society, we need more robust dialogue, and that must include the right to insult or to offend.
Atkinson is particularly concerned that giving authorities broad powers to police speech opens the door to a slippery slope, where the lines of what's deemed hateful or offensive are constantly shifting. He warns that if society continues down this path, we could end up in an environment where people self-censor out of fear that their opinions will land them in legal trouble. In his view, offensive speech deserves protection as long as it doesn't cause direct harm. Without this protection, Atkinson believes society risks shutting down genuine discussions, especially on controversial or difficult topics. To him, the ability to say something that might make others uncomfortable is a cornerstone of a healthy democracy.
As President Obama said in an address to the United Nations only a month or so ago, laudable efforts to restrict speech can become a tool to silence critics or oppress minorities. The strongest weapon against hateful speech is not repression, it is more speech. And that's the essence of my thesis.
What makes this clash so fascinating is that both Atkinson and Starmer are arguing for something they see as a defence of societal values. Starmer wants to protect people from the harm that hateful speech can inflict, viewing stricter regulations as a way to ensure respect and safety, particularly for those who have historically been marginalised or silenced. To him, failing to address hate speech, especially in the vast, often unregulated space of social media, would be to neglect a real societal issue. Supporters of his stance point to the toxic environments that unchecked hate speech creates, where individuals can be targeted relentlessly simply for who they are. For Starmer, stricter hate speech laws represent a responsible step toward making society more inclusive and respectful.
Threatening or abusive speech may, depending on the circumstances, be a proportionate response. We do not think that language or behaviour that is merely insulting should ever be criminalised in this way.
On the flip side, Atkinson believes these regulations could create more harm than good, curbing the diversity of thought that is essential for societal growth. He fears that once society starts policing opinions, even those that are merely unpopular or uncomfortable, it sets a precedent for suppressing voices that challenge the mainstream. Atkinson's warning isn't hypothetical. He points to real-world examples, such as the man detained for calling a police horse gay, or the teenager prosecuted for calling Scientology a cult. To him, these incidents aren't just isolated cases. They illustrate how laws intended to prevent harm can quickly overreach, punishing harmless expressions or personal opinions. Atkinson's concern is that by equipping authorities with the power to decide what constitutes offensive speech, we risk creating an atmosphere where open discourse is stifled and conformity is enforced. Ultimately, the debate between Starmer and Atkinson reflects a broader tension within British society and beyond. On one side, there's a call for stronger protections against hate speech, rooted in the belief that a more inclusive and respectful society requires limits on harmful rhetoric. On the other, there's a growing fear that these protections could lead to a culture of censorship, where people are afraid to speak out or challenge ideas. Atkinson's stance resonates with those who feel that freedom of expression is a non-negotiable right, while Starmer's approach appeals to those who believe that unchecked speech can be harmful and should be controlled in certain contexts.
And say, did you hear that joke that comedian said in that Netflix special? Did you think that was right or wrong? And all I say is,
Rowan Atkinson has a lot to say about how society is evolving, and he's not exactly thrilled with the direction things are heading. For someone who made a career out of poking fun at the absurdities of human behaviour, Atkinson is now watching as real life becomes as strange as satire. To him, it's like the scripts from his comedic past are coming to life, but it's no laughing matter. He believes that modern society is leaning heavily toward a culture of intolerance. Not intolerance of hate or harm, but an intolerance of differing opinions. And that shift, he warns, could be far more damaging than we might realise.
I'm a great believer that if a joke has an appreciative audience, no matter how small, no matter who they are, then it is worthy. It should be, as it were.
Atkinson sees this emerging culture as one that silences people simply for holding views that others disagree with. In his eyes, this isn't a progressive or open-minded shift. It's a form of censorship that shuts down important conversations. He argues that society is moving toward a place where only safe or acceptable opinions are allowed, and everything else is met with hostility or even legal consequences. In Atkinson's view, we're becoming more restrictive, not more free. By trying to control every word people say or every idea they express, we risk creating an environment where diversity of thought is stifled. And he believes that if we keep going down this path, the consequences could be dire. For Atkinson, a healthy society is one where people can challenge each other's ideas openly, even if it means ruffling a few feathers. He's not saying that hate speech or harassment should be allowed, but he's concerned that the boundary between offensive and harmful is becoming dangerously blurred. In his mind, people are becoming too quick to call for punishment or censorship the moment they encounter something they disagree with. This, he argues, doesn't create a kinder society. It creates a restrictive one where people are too afraid to speak their minds. It's a society where individuals who step outside the lines of accepted thinking are silenced or penalised. And for Atkinson, that's not progress, that's regression. One of the things that makes Atkinson's perspective so interesting is that he sees it all through the lens of comedy and satire. In his comedic past, absurd scenarios were the basis for humour. Ridiculous situations, like someone getting in trouble for making a harmless joke, were once relegated to sketches and scripts designed to make us laugh. But today, he's seeing these scenarios play out in real life. He points to examples like the man detained for calling a police horse gay, or the teenager prosecuted for labelling Scientology a cult. These incidents are so bizarre that they sound like the punchlines to satirical skits, yet they're real events that actually happened. To Atkinson, this blurring of lines between satire and reality is more than just ironic, it's alarming. The fact that society is dealing with issues that used to be the stuff of comedy sketches is, in his view, a signal that we're heading down a troubling road. What used to be exaggerated for laughs is now a reflection of real policies and real punishments. And when society starts to mirror satire, Atkinson believes it's a sign that something has gone very wrong. He's concerned that we're creating a world where every word is scrutinised, every joke analysed for potential offence, and every opinion weighed against a backdrop of intolerance. In such a world, he argues, people aren't encouraged to think critically or speak openly. They're encouraged to stay silent.
Appallingly prickly and intolerant society has become of even the mildest adverse comment. The law should not be aiding and abetting this new intolerance. Free speech can only suffer if the law prevents us from dealing with its consequences.
Atkinson's broader critique is that this culture of policing language doesn't just hurt individuals, it hurts society as a whole. When people are too scared to express opinions that might be unpopular, society loses out on valuable ideas and perspectives. Atkinson sees open dialogue, even if it's uncomfortable, as essential for growth and understanding. He believes that progress comes from challenging ideas and confronting uncomfortable truths, not from silencing them. And yet, he feels that modern society is moving in the opposite direction, where people feel entitled to silence voices they simply don't want to hear. This, he argues, is a new form of intolerance, one that's cloaked in the language of inclusivity, but is, in reality, far from inclusive. In the past, Atkinson's comedy pushed boundaries by exaggerating the absurd, but today he sees reality itself becoming absurd. The irony isn't lost on him. He warns that by creating laws and social norms that punish people for expressing views that are merely disagreeable, we're creating a culture where satire can't even keep up with real life. In his view, if people can be detained for harmless comments or prosecuted for expressing opinions, society has strayed into territory that's both strange and frightening. He fears that this will only discourage people from speaking out or from questioning the status quo, ultimately leading to a society that's not only less free, but also less open to new ideas.